She was abandoned by her family for gambling money, so she returned as a powerful CEO and publicly exposed their betrayal. In the dimly lit apartment, Judith Williams was packing the last few clothes into her suitcase. The morning sun, streaming through the window, illuminated her tired face. While recognized by her family as an ordinary office worker, in reality, she hid much beneath that facade. Gazing at the family photo hanging on the living room wall, she let out a deep sigh. In the picture, her father George stood proudly, her mother Martha smiled gracefully, and her sister Cindy beamed with a bright smile. And there was Judith herself, standing at the edge, with an expression that always seemed slightly detached. "Do I really need to go?" Judith muttered to herself. Family vacation. Even the sound of those words evoked complicated emotions in her heart. For the past 20 years, the Williams family conversations had always revolved around her sister Cindy, Cindy's school grades, Cindy's relationships, Cindy's job, and Cindy's problems. The phone rang, and Martha's name appeared on the screen. Judith hesitated for a moment before picking up. "Judith, are you ready? I'll be there to pick you up in 30 minutes. Her mother's voice had its usual hurried tone. "Yes, Mom, I'm almost ready. Don't forget, Cindy said she found a new store in Las Vegas, so make sure you bring something nice to dress up in." Judith closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Of course. And make sure your wallet is ready too. You're always so frugal, so splurging a little for your sister once in a while wouldn't hurt, would it?" Judith silently stared at her bank account balance. "Understood, Mom." After hanging up, she opened a hidden cabinet in her study. Inside were neatly arranged documents she never showed her family: stock certificates from major information technology companies, real estate deeds, and a certificate proving her as the founder of Connect Life, her application used by millions around the world. A bitter smile crossed Judith's face. Her family had no idea how successful she actually was. In their eyes, Judith was just an ordinary office worker who lacked the glamour of her sister Cindy. Since childhood, her parents' attention had always been focused on Cindy. Cindy shone brightly, she was good at sports, sociable, and had a charming smile. Meanwhile, Judith was introverted, immersed in the world of computers and programming, and often called strange by her family. When Cindy received a scholarship to the local university after graduating high school, her parents threw a big party, but when Judith got a full scholarship to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, she was merely told, "Of course, you were always studying anyway." After college, Judith developed her own application, which was acquired by a major information technology company. She became a millionaire overnight, but she never told her family about her success. This was because she wanted her family to recognize her worth not for money, but as Judith the person. As she closed her suitcase, Judith looked out the window. She loved her parents and sister, that was an undeniable fact. That's why she had secretly paid off her sister's college loans and provided assistance with her parents' medical insurance. They didn't know it, but Cindy's luxurious graduation trip had also been funded by Judith. Yet, there was always a discomfort and loneliness deep inside her. At family gatherings, she was always pushed to the sidelines, rarely asked for her opinion, and important decisions were always made without her. The doorbell rang, bringing Judith back to reality. She looked around the room, making sure all important documents were well hidden, only showing evidence of her normal life. "Judith, we're running late." Martha's voice came from beyond the door. Judith sighed one last time and picked up her suitcase. She couldn't yet imagine how this Las Vegas trip would change her life. Her heart was tangled with complex emotions, a deep love for her family, a desperate wish to be recognized that she had carried for years, and a small but persistent hope that something might change during this trip. As she opened the front door, her parents and Cindy waved from the car. Cindy had a designer bag over her shoulder and wore large sunglasses. "Hurry up! Las Vegas is waiting!" Cindy shouted, waving her hand. Judith smiled and headed toward the car with her heavy suitcase. The Las Vegas night was filled with dazzling lights and noise. Standing on the casino floor, Judith felt out of place in the glamorous atmosphere of the Saints Hotel and Casino. Around her, her family was enjoying themselves in their own ways. Father George was carefully examining his cards at the poker table, while Mother Martha let out little screams every time she pulled the lever of a slot machine. And her sister, Cindy? She had claimed a spot at the roulette table, placing chips with flashy gestures. Her face was flushed with excitement, and her eyes gleamed with a thirst for victory. "Red 36!" Cindy shouted, pushing another pile of chips onto the table. The roulette balls spun, and an expectant silence dominated the table. The ball landed on black 17. "Oh, come on!" Cindy kicked her chair in frustration. "I was so close!" Judith quietly observed her sister. Cindy must have already lost over $1,000 tonight alone, yet she showed no signs of giving up. "Judith, why don't you place a bet too?" Martha called out to her daughter. "It must be boring just watching, isn't it?" "I'm not interested in gambling, Mom," Judith answered quietly. "I'm having enough fun just watching." Martha shrugged. "You're always like that, so passive about everything." At that moment, Cindy got up from the table and walked toward the family. Her expression showed anxiety. "Mom, Dad, can I talk to you?" Cindy said in a low voice. "Could you lend me a little more money?" George frowned. "Cindy, I just gave you some a moment ago. But I just know I'm going to win this time," Cindy pleaded desperately. "I can see the system now." Martha looked at George and nodded silently. George sighed and took out his wallet but frowned when he looked inside. "Sorry, I don't have any more cash," George said. "We need to go to an ATM." "Judith!" Martha suddenly turned around. "You have money, don't you? You're always saving, so you must have some to spare." Judith looked at her mother in surprise. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I want you to lend Cindy some money," Martha said matter-of-factly. "We're family, so we should help each other, right?" Judith was speechless for a moment. She certainly had more than enough funds, but the issue wasn't about money. "Cindy," Judith faced her sister, "haven't you had enough fun for today? We have all day tomorrow. Why don't we call it a day?" Cindy's expression darkened. "What do you know? I'm just about to hit the jackpot." "There's no guarantee you'll win," Judith replied calmly. "You should play within your means." "Within my means?" Cindy raised her voice. "You're always trying to hold me back." "Calm down, both of you," George intervened. "Judith, why can't you help your sister? It's just a few hundred." "The issue isn't the amount, Dad," Judith said quietly. "I think it's time Cindy learned to act responsibly." "You!" Martha's voice rose higher. "You never think about the family when Cindy was so looking forward to this." Noticing that casino guests around them were starting to turn their heads, George urged the family, "Let's talk outside, not here." The four headed out of the casino toward the hotel parking lot. The night breeze cooled their heated cheeks, but the tension didn't disappear. Getting into George's car, a heavy silence enveloped them. As the engine started, the car drove away from the dazzling lights of Las Vegas toward the quiet desert. "I don't understand your attitude," breaking the long silence, Martha said. "We've always thought of you, but you—" Judith stared out the window as she answered. "Really? Cindy has always been the priority, hasn't she?" "That's because Cindy needed it." Martha raised her voice. "You've always only thought about yourself." "Only about myself?" Judith's voice trembled. She swallowed her words. It wasn't the time to tell them the truth, not yet. "Look," Martha pointed at Cindy. "See how hurt your sister is?" Cindy's eyes were indeed tearful, but Judith knew it wasn't genuine. She had seen this act many times before. "Enough," Judith said in a tired voice. "There's no point arguing any further. I'm not going to lend Cindy money for gambling." A dark smile appeared on Martha's face. "Then perhaps we should make you reflect on this." Before Judith could understand what her mother meant, George suddenly pulled the car over to the shoulder. A desolate desert highway, nothing for miles around. "Dad, what are you doing?" Judith asked anxiously. "Get out." George's voice was cold. "What? Get out," George repeated. "You seem to need some time to think." "You're joking, right?" Judith looked at her parents in disbelief. "This is the middle of nowhere." "You have your cell phone," Martha said coldly. "Since you're so smart, you should be able to find your way back." Judith was speechless. She couldn't believe this was really happening, but seeing her father's cold expression and her mother's determined attitude, she had to accept the reality. With trembling hands, she opened the door and got out of the car. The gravel crunched under her shoes. Cindy rolled down the window and smiled triumphantly. "Enjoy your survival experience!" The engine roared, and the car returned to the highway. Judith stood frozen, watching the receding taillights. The desert silence enveloped her, and for the first time she felt complete solitude. Hot tears streamed down her cheeks. This was her family, the people she had always loved and secretly supported. They had left her alone in the desert. But a few minutes later, Judith's expression changed. There were no more tears. Instead, a light of determination shone in her eyes. She took out her smartphone and scrolled through her contact list. "No need to put up with this anymore," she muttered quietly. "It's time to show my true self." She tapped a number and made a call. After 3 rings, the call connected. "Jake, this is Judith Williams." Her voice was filled with confidence. "It's an emergency. Can you arrange for an Escalade from the Las Vegas branch right away?" "Yes, fully equipped, and I'll need that special suitcase too." As stars shone in the desert sky, headlights approached from the distance. Judith sat on a small rock, waiting calmly. The earlier panic had vanished, and now only quiet determination remained in her heart. A black Cadillac Escalade glided to a stop in front of her. The man who stepped out from the driver's seat was dressed in a perfect suit and bowed his head respectfully. "I apologize for the delay." "Thank you, Jake." Judith stood up, brushing off the sand as she replied. "You were quicker than I expected. I came as fast as I could, with top priority." Jake opened the rear door and took out a black suitcase. "Everything is prepared as instructed." Judith accepted the suitcase and nodded quietly. "I'm going to change. Will you wait in the car?" A few minutes later, Judith returned to the car looking completely different. The cheap casual wear was gone, replaced by a perfectly tailored Chanel suit. Her hair was styled in a sophisticated updo, and a subtle yet elegant diamond necklace sparkled at her neck. Her expression had also changed. Gone was the shadow of the hesitant sister. In its place stood a successful woman filled with unwavering confidence. "Please head to the Bellagio," she commanded, in a soft yet authoritative voice. As the Cadillac smoothly set off, Judith stared into the darkness outside the window. In her mind, events of the past few years flashed by like a montage: her computer science degree from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the application development she had started alone in a corner of her apartment, and the globally successful Connect Life application. Her creation was on smartphones worldwide, generating a company value of tens of billions of dollars. The lights of Las Vegas approached. Judith took out a small mirror and checked her appearance. "I'm ready," she told herself. "No need to hide anymore." Upon arriving at the Bellagio, the doorman opened the car door for her. "Welcome back, Miss Williams. Please use the very important person entrance as usual," the doorman said politely. Judith nodded quietly and entered the casino. The hotel staff recognized her and gave her respectful glances. She was one of the few customers who owned a very important person room at the Bellagio. "Chief Executive Officer Williams, how are you feeling tonight?" Richard, the casino manager, approached her. "Good evening, Richard," Judith smiled gently. "Tonight will be special. My family is in the building. I'm looking for them." "Of course, let me help you," Richard answered immediately. "How many people?" "3, my father, mother, and sister," Judith explained. "They're probably on the main floor." Richard gave brief instructions, and the staff sprang into action. A few minutes later, the family's location was determined. They were on the main casino floor. Cindy continued to lose, and her parents stood beside her with tired expressions. "We found them," Richard reported. "Shall I escort you?" Judith thought for a moment and shook her head. "No, I'll go alone, but could you watch from a distance and come immediately when I signal?" Richard nodded. "Understood." Judith began to slowly cross the casino floor. The sound of her expensive high heels on the floor seemed to demonstrate her firm resolve. As she approached, people around noticed her and gave respectful glances. Some whispered, "Isn't that the founder of Connect Life?" Finally, she stood behind her family. It was the moment when Cindy had just bet her last chip and lost again. "It's hopeless." Cindy slumped over the table. "I've lost everything." "It's okay, we'll think about it tomorrow," Martha said in a tired voice. "Let's get some rest tonight." "It's Judith's fault." Cindy suddenly raised her voice. "If she had helped me, this wouldn't have happened." "Calm down, Cindy," George said quietly. "It's too late now. Judith has probably already returned to the hotel. We'll talk to her tomorrow. I wonder how she got back." Martha frowned. "Did she call a taxi?" There was no need for that. The three turned around in surprise. Standing there was someone completely different from the Judith they knew, dressed in an elegant suit, looking down at them with a confident expression. "Judith?" George said in disbelief. "Good evening, Dad, Mom, Cindy," Judith replied calmly. The return from the desert was comfortable. "You? How?" Martha asked in a breathless voice. At that moment Richard approached their table. "Chief Executive Officer Williams, is everything all right?" he asked respectfully. "Is there anything I can help you with?" The blood drained from Martha and George's faces. Cindy's mouth hung open. "Thank you, Richard," Judith answered calmly. "I've just found my family. Could you prepare the very important person lounge? We need a private conversation." "Of course, I'll have it ready immediately." Richard nodded and left to give instructions. The three family members stared at her, speechless. Cindy was the first to speak. "Chief Executive Officer, you? What kind of joke is this?" Judith smiled slightly. "It's not a joke, Cindy. We have a lot to talk about." "But you're just an ordinary office worker," George stammered. "No, Dad. I am the founder and chief executive officer of Connect Life," Judith answered quietly. "Connect Life?" Martha's eyes widened. "The application used all over the world?" Cindy suddenly took out her smartphone and stared at the screen. There was indeed the Connect Life icon, an application she used every day. "This is unbelievable," Cindy said in a trembling voice. "The very important person lounge is ready," Richard returned. "Shall I escort you?" Judith looked at her family and nodded quietly. "Please do. We need to have a family discussion." As they stood up and headed toward the very important person area, casino guests sent curious glances their way. The staff showed respect to Judith, bowing their heads as she passed. "It's time to talk about everything," Judith said as they walked down the hallway. "Would you come to my office?" In the heavy silence, the three nodded wordlessly. Their faces showed confusion, surprise, and a hint of fear. The journey to the very important person office on the top floor of the Bellagio felt eternal for the family. No one spoke in the elevator, and the three huddled together, keeping their distance from the corner where Judith stood. Their expressions mixed confusion, fear, and a touch of guilt. Advancing down a hallway with marble floors, they stopped in front of a door with a gold plate engraved Williams. As Judith waved her keycard, the door opened silently. "Please," she gestured to her family. As they stepped inside, they gasped. From the vast windows, the Las Vegas night view spread before them, its glamorous light softly illuminating the entire room. The walls were adorned with numerous awards and certificates, and in the center, a framed magazine cover with Person of the Year written on it. The person in the photo was unmistakably Judith. "Is this real?" Martha asked in a trembling voice. "Sit down," Judith pointed to the sofa in the reception area. "I'll explain everything." As the three sat down, Judith went to the bar counter and poured scotch into 4 glasses. She distributed the drinks and finally took one for herself. "Cheers," she said quietly, raising her glass slightly, to the truth. In silence, the 4 each took a sip. Cindy grimaced, but her parents desperately tried to maintain their composure. 10 years ago, I developed an application called Connect Life," Judith began quietly. "Initially, it was a simple tool for people to communicate more efficiently, but eventually it came to be used worldwide. 2 years later, a major information technology company acquired it, and I agreed to the sale on the condition that I would remain as chief executive officer." "But why didn't you tell us?" George asked in confusion. "About such success. Why I didn't tell you." Judith put down her glass and walked toward the window. "That's a complex answer, Dad," she continued, gazing at the city lights. "During college, I had a boyfriend. When he learned I had received a Massachusetts Institute of Technology scholarship, he suddenly became interested in me. And when my application first started gaining attention, he defrauded me of a large sum of money claiming he would invest." Turning back, she saw her family staring at her, holding their breath. "And after my success, many people approached me for my money or status. Few people saw the real me." "But we're family," Martha protested. "Really?" Judith's voice was cold. "Have I ever been treated as family? Have you ever celebrated my success? Have you ever been there for me during important moments in my life?" The three were at a loss for words, staring at the floor. "But that's not all." Judith softened her voice a bit. "Cindy, I wanted you to be independent. I wanted you to succeed on your own, without the struggles I faced. Tears welled up in Cindy's eyes. But I paid for your tuition, Judith quietly confessed. The scholarship you thought you had earned was actually from a fund I had anonymously established. What? Cindy gasped. Your health insurance, your car, your apartment rent subsidy. I've been supporting all of it from behind the scenes. The blood drained from Cindy's face. But Dad and Mom? Judith looked at George and Martha. They knew. At least they knew there was support from me. But we didn't know it was from your company, George stammered. Is it true? Cindy turned to her parents. You both knew? Martha nodded with a guilty expression. But we wanted to build your confidence. We thought if you knew Judith was providing the money, you wouldn't try hard. So you kept me blind? Cindy's voice trembled with anger. Treating me like a child. We were wrong, George admitted in a tired voice. Both of us. A heavy silence dominated the room. Judith went to her desk and took out an old photograph from a drawer. It was a picture from the day Cindy graduated high school. Remember? She handed the photo to Cindy. That day, everyone said you were the first in the family to go to college. But, Cindy said in confusion, you went to Massachusetts Institute of Technology? Yes, but no one cared, Judith smiled sadly. My grades and successes were always overshadowed by Cindy. Parental love, attention, everything was directed at you. Martha covered her face with her hands. What terrible things we've done. What I really wanted wasn't money, Judith's voice trembled slightly. It was recognition, just that. Cindy had been staring at her smartphone. Suddenly she looked up as if realizing something. Wait, this application on my phone? She pointed to the Connect Life icon. This is yours? Judith nodded. Over 2 billion people worldwide use it. Unbelievable, Cindy murmured. My sister. Suddenly George stood up and knelt before Judith. Tears welled in his eyes. Forgive me, Judith. His voice trembled. As a father, I failed to have such a daughter to be proud of, and not to have been able to acknowledge it. At his words, Martha broke down in tears. How foolish we were. We made you suffer with our biases and expectations. Cindy slowly stood up and approached her sister. I'm sorry, she choked on her words. I always looked down on you, but in reality, you were the one I should have looked up to. Judith's hard expression slowly began to crumble. It was the moment when emotions she had suppressed for years were finally released. I wasn't perfect either, she quietly admitted. By hiding the truth, I created a wall between us. What I really wanted was just to be loved as family. Cindy took a step forward and embraced her sister. From now on, it will be different. Let's be real sisters. Martha and George joined, and the four embraced wordlessly for a long time. Outside the window, the Las Vegas night view warmly illuminated them. After a while, George quietly asked, Today in the desert, how can you forgive us? Judith moved away slightly and looked at her family's faces. Forgiveness is also about liberating oneself, she smiled. Besides, if it hadn't been for today, we might not have reached this moment. But we did terrible things, Martha said. Yes, Judith acknowledged, but that's in the past. What matters is what we do from now on. Cindy held her sister's hand. I want to change, to be independent, to achieve something with my own strength. I'll help you, Judith promised, but this time, not with money, but as a sister. The four embraced again. There was a sense of a new beginning, overcoming years of misunderstandings and wounds, a moment of a fresh start as a family. Outside the window, countless lights of Las Vegas shone like stars. It was as if they were celebrating the beginning of their new journey. Cheers! The pleasant sound of glasses touching resonated on the spacious terrace. The sunset, visible from Judith's luxurious California mansion, had dyed the sky red and orange. Surrounding the table was her family. 1 year had passed since then. This Thanksgiving is special, Martha said contentedly. She had a softer expression than before, and new gray hairs had appeared, but her eyes had a youthful sparkle. We're thankful for both Connect Life's initial public offering and our new beginning, Judith replied with a smile. George looked at his daughter proudly. At 63, he had now fully retired and was passionately mentoring young entrepreneurs based on Judith's experiences. Thanks to you, I found a new purpose in life. Across the table, Cindy sat with a confident expression. She had changed the most over the past year. Recovering from her gambling addiction, she had launched a fashion blog called Authentic Style, which was already achieving modest success. "I still can't believe my blog is getting such support," Cindy said happily. "Your talent is being recognized." Judith nodded toward her sister. "It's a path you found yourself, not something I imposed on you." Cindy looked at her sister with gratitude. "At first it was difficult to refuse your startup funding, but I'm glad I was able to accomplish it on my own. And now you've taken your first step as an influencer," Martha said proudly. During the meal, George gently knocked his glass to get the family's attention. "Everyone, we have special news." Martha smiled and held her husband's hand. "I've obtained a counselor's qualification," she said quietly. "Starting next month, I'll begin working as a family therapist specializing in the restoration of parent-child relationships." "Mom, that's wonderful." Judith was genuinely happy. "The day we left you in the desert, I committed the biggest mistake of my life." Tears welled in Martha's eyes, but that experience led me to a path where I can help other families. As Judith poured dessert wine, she suddenly remembered something. "Last week, I received a call from the Nevada Department of Transportation." "What for?" Cindy asked. "Remember that desert highway?" Judith smiled. "Someone who heard our story wants to build a small monument there, called Family Reconciliation. Everyone was too moved to speak. At first I thought about declining," Judith continued, "but then I thought our experience might give hope to others." "That's a wonderful idea." George nodded deeply. As twilight deepened, the four were enveloped in a peaceful silence. The former tension and conflict had disappeared, replaced by a gentle atmosphere of understanding and acceptance. "My goal was never to show off my family," Judith said quietly. "What I really wanted was to have my worth recognized, and we finally understand that." Martha gently held her daughter's hand. As the first stars began to shine in the night sky, Judith looked around at her family. It had been a long journey, but they had finally become a family in the true sense. The journey that began on the day she was abandoned in the desert had actually become the most valuable turning point in her life. "I'm not saying this just because it's Thanksgiving," Cindy said quietly, "but I'm truly grateful for becoming a real family like this." "Forever," Judith smiled. The four raised their glasses again and toasted to their new bond and future.